All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, confirmation hearings for Neera Tanden were held in the Senate yesterday. The quintessential Hillary world operative was, of course, nominated by the Biden administration to head the Office of Management and Budget. That is a powerful role. It includes oversight of the budget and would also put her in a position to decide which compromised cronies should get ethics waivers from any of the Biden admin's conflict of interest policies. All of which begs the question, why in the world would any progressive, scratch that, anyone with standards, vote yes on this confirmation? Predictably, a lot of the hearing focused on Neera's mean tweets. Here's Rob Portman expressing deep concern over Washington's sacred religion of civility.
You wrote that Susan Collins is, quote, the worst, that Tom Cotton is a fraud, that vampires have more heart than Ted Cruz.
Show me the lie, folks. Seriously, though, it tells you all you need to know about D.C. that they fixate on their own hurt feelings over old tweets rather than on Neera's long record of selling out to corporate interests. And why do they focus more on mean tweets than on corruption? Well, because corruption is business as usual in D.C., a business, by the way, that almost all of these senators are intimately acquainted with and involved in. They don't like to point it out because it reflects on them. New York Times' Ken Vogel documented some of that hypocrisy, noting that while Neera claims to abhor the influence of corporate special interests in politics now, she was happy to take checks for her think tank, the Center for American Progress, or CAP, from Amazon, Facebook, Google, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To his credit, Senator Josh Hawley actually bothered to raise these concerns.
$665,000, I think, from the personal foundation of Mr. Zuckerberg. Mm-hmm. Millions of dollars from Wall Street financiers, big banks, foreign governments, Silicon Valley, $1 million from the managing partner at Bain Capital, $2.5 million from the UAE. That was between 2016 and 2018. Given this record, how can you assure us that you'll work to see that these Silicon Valley and Wall Street firms don't exercise undue influence? Frankly, influence that they've already got in the making of government policy and the control of our economy. I mean, how can you assure us that you're going to be an independent actor when you've been so close to them to have raised so much money over all these years?
Now, look, I will forever doubt Hawley's sincerity on these issues, given his support for Trump's corporate tax giveaway. However, it was nice to at least hear someone focused on the thing that actually matters, instead of Tanden's highly relatable comments about Ted Cruz being a vampire and McConnell being Voldemort. Because the truth is, regardless of her answers yesterday that, oh, of course she'd be independent, we already know what kind of an operator Tanden is. We've got the proof. Now, a lot of times corruption is indirect. There isn't a direct link, no smoking gun. With Neera, we've got the receipts. Let's start with this one. After accepting millions in cash from Michael Bloomberg, a Center for American Progress report on anti-Muslim bias was scrubbed of every mention of Michael Bloomberg and the heavy-handed tactics he deployed to surveil Muslim communities following 9/11. A senior official at the think tank fretted about the strong reaction from Bloomberg World if we release the report as written, and 3 other people with direct knowledge said that report was altered directly because they did not want to piss off their billionaire donor. Or let's try this one on for size. After a major Democratic donor called to complain, Neera personally intervened, according to leaked emails, in order to quash criticism of Israel on the Think Progress blog site, which supposedly had journalistic independence from CAP. They went on to host Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for a softball Q&A at a time when the Obama administration was actually openly feuding with Netanyahu and his reactionary government. Should not be surprising, though, given that the entire concept of the Center for American Progress was a corrupt undertaking. It was essentially founded with the intent of being Hillary Clinton's administration in waiting. Didn't quite work out that way on that front, but needless to say, donors understood perfectly well what they were doing when they wrote big checks to CAP. It was an ideal way to get in good with the Clintons, who everyone thought would soon be returning to the White House. That's why corporations, foreign governments, and Wall Street banks all lined up to write big checks. It's why in instance after instance, Clinton world donors' and allies' interests were put before any sort of progressive or liberal value. It's why when Faz Shakir, who was a Think Progress journalist at the time and went on to become Bernie's campaign manager, dared to ask Hillary Clinton a challenging question, Neera was so outraged that she walked around the table and punched Faz in the chest. She claimed to the New York Times that she pushed him but didn't punch him. Again, Faz's crime was asking Hillary a question about Iraq. Pretty gross, huh? A perfect Washington machine for peddling access, cozying up to the powerful, and crafting policy that will never really challenge the powerful interests who are bankrolling it all. Now, the person who has perhaps been most clear on the problem with Neera Tanden is, ironically, the person who now has the most power to block her nomination. One Bernard Sanders called out Neera in a letter to Cap and in an email to his supporters back in 2016. As Senator Sanders wrote at the time, the Center for American Progress is an organization whose massive annual budget is bankrolled by billionaires and corporate executives that profit from finance, pharmaceutical companies, fossil fuels, and sending American jobs overseas. The Center for American Progress has deep connections to the economic and political elites who have done so much damage to working families in every zip code. And what we must do today is send a message that we are prepared to fight back against those who are working day and night to defeat our movement. Now, Bernie's campaign may be over, but he still has a chance to fight back. I understand this is uncomfortable, and I'm sure Bernie's weighing the relationship he has with Biden, his ability to get big-ticket items through budget reconciliation, and much more. But in the end, this is just really simple. There is no good reason to confirm one of the worst actors in Washington and one of the most devoted enemies of the political left. The idea of Neera Tanden in a position of power should make your stomach turn, and the notion of Neera Tanden as an ethics watchdog is a joke. No one who cares about corruption or working families should vote for Neera Tanden. And honestly, Sagar, this radar could have been like an hour long.
Yeah,
there was so much, just on the corruption front, there are corrupt deals with like energy companies, all kinds of foreign governments, all of that. Not to mention on the policy front, advocating for cuts to Social Security
welfare,
and budget hawker.
Yeah.
There was an email that she sent that was like, we should just invade Libya and take their oil. Like,
yes.
What are you talking about? So on every angle, but I really think the core of it is, and people need to understand this, it's not like, oh, these are isolated incidents with Center for American Progress. No, this was the intent of this organization because it was set up as a way to be in Hillary Clinton administration in waiting. So all these donors would flood money in to get close to the Clintons and get their access and get their wish list and make sure that the policy that was coming out of the Institute would never go too far and threaten their bottom line.
Yeah, that's their entire purpose was to act as a donor and staffing machine for the rest of the Clinton machine. That was Podesta basically openly admitted this. In fact, he was the one who took the think tank industrial complex and actually just turned it up to 12. At the time, they at least would pretend that they stood for values and stuff. He was like, yeah, look, this is a Clinton operation and we're here to farm. Whatever Clinton Foundation won't take, they're like, bring it on in, folks. And they brought in all this foreign money, all of this money in order to basically buy influence with the incoming administration, just like the Clinton Foundation at the time. And she was the chief henchwoman. Once again, she also, as we've pointed out here, whenever she was nominated, or at least indicated, has no expertise in budgeting whatsoever, which is actually quite a complicated thing. She's a pure political actor. If she was a White House advisor, it would make sense. They're trying to put a pure political partisan hack, Hatchet woman, in charge of a real administration in the government. That can cause real problems. And so this entire thing is a joke. Like you said, her tweets are only objectionable in that they reveal that she's kind of crazy and that she really is a legitimate hatchet person for this like organization and machine. And it shows, again, very much where Biden and the White House and all that team are willing to throw their lot behind and who they are. Look, we all know Bernie's going to vote for it. He didn't say anything about it. He hasn't even raised any objections. It's literally in front of his committee. I think that's sad, given, it is sad that they reduced him to voting for and supporting and shepherding through a nominee of a person who has done maybe more than anyone else in D.C. to destroy him and his movement. But that's basically the position he finds himself with Biden.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, and once again, there's this dynamic within the Democratic Party where the neoliberal establishment, of which Neera is a prominent, aggressive operative within. And look, she's been in some ways very effective,
she's good.
very smart. She understands, and that whole wing of the party understands that the left of the party, the Bernie Sanders left, is a threat to them. They see very clearly Bernie and all of his movement as the enemy. And that view is not understood or reciprocated oftentimes on the other side. I mean, this is a woman who has made it like her mission to destroy the left of the party.
She's very open.
Why? She is very open.
Yeah.
She has been very open about it. Why? It's not out of really any principle other than sort of like the principle of continuing the consultant industrial complex.
Donor flow.
And money laundering of the DNC. I mean, that's the commitment that she and others around her and others like her share. But they see this as a battle and a war within the party. And she will do whatever it takes to make sure that that part of the party that actually stands for things like universal health care and lifting wages and all of that is completely crushed and neutered. The recognition doesn't seem to go both ways, though, and that's why you end up in this situation where it's like, well, you know, Biden won, and I guess he can have his nominee, and what's the big deal anyway? I just want to underscore once again that one of her roles as OMB director will be handing out ethics waivers.
Yeah.
Ethics, well, like that alone, you should be like, absolutely not. This is the person you're going to put in charge. And by the way, I do want to, I mean, the question yesterday was kind of sad. Like, Hawley did a decent job with that, but even he didn't tie it to the ethics waivers thing and really pack that punch. No questions about her policy positions, et cetera. So, and it was completely partisan. Of course, the Democrats just gave her softballs.
Yeah, that's where we're at right now.
All right, Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.